Hey Baltimoreans, I just sat down with Bobby Lepine. He's running for our state senate against an establishment Democrat that I will openly admit I am not a fan of. So why don't you check out what Bobby has to say and see if you think he's a better fit for Baltimore and Maryland the way I do. Hey y'all, I'm here with Bobby Lepine. He's running for state senate in Maryland. He's volunteered some time for me to ask a couple questions so you can see what's going on in our state before voting time. Because if you're like me, you're scrambling to figure out the policies of everyone that's on that list that you're going to mail in or go fill out in person. So
and look, before you move on, before it's like, oh my God, this is boring, I just want to say the importance of state legislatures, okay? When a woman's right to choose was overturned by the Supreme Court, it wasn't the federal government that took women's rights away, it was state governments that did it individually. When trans people in Kansas were told that they must out themselves, out their genders on their driver's license or go to jail, that was state legislatures that did that. Redistricting right now that we're facing in America, mid-cycle redistricting to combat Donald Trump, or Trump trying to combat democracy, all state legislatures. So people don't realize how important it is, a state senator or a state representative or a state delegate, but it's like uber important. I mean, when I was a government teacher, I used to say, all politics is local, all right? And you think about your minimum wage, your health care that you have, the taxes that you pay, the potholes that don't get fixed, the fire department that comes is all local government. It has the biggest impact on someone's life than the federal government. And although it's important to take back Congress, it's like a lot of love should go to local and state politics because they're the ones that have the most impact, but it's also the ones that nobody cares about. Nobody watches, and then we wonder why we keep getting screwed.
Yeah, absolutely. The Supreme Court said you can take their rights away if you want to, and they were like, yes, we do.
Yes, we do, and that's exactly what they did in Alabama, Mississippi. Voting rights are being stripped. That's actually how one of the reasons why I got involved in the race against my guy, because he's the only Democrat from a Democrat state in the entire country, that decided he wasn't going to fight back against Donald Trump when it came to redistricting. He's as the Senate president, the guy I'm running against, he has the power to decide what bills will be voted upon on the Senate floor and what bills will not. And he chose to kill the redistricting bill in Maryland, which means now Maryland couldn't offer an additional Democrat to Congress to fight Trump. And unfortunately, I just looked at the numbers this morning, and it looks like in this next midterm election that the Republicans will outnumber the Democrats.
I was fearing that. I was fearing that as well in our state.
Yeah. So not even just our state, but our country in the Congress. Anyway, sorry.
No, you're good.
I cut you off.
Hey, it's great. You actually
people normally say when they say state senate, they're like, oh shit, I'm gonna go.
Hey, you addressed one of the questions I have already, so perfect. We can skip that one.
Cool.
One of the things I want to ask you, as a veteran, close to DC. How do you feel about / what should our response be to them deploying service members in DC on U.S. soil?
It is the most disrespectful thing to do in the National Guard to deploy them in cities to clean up trash, because that's what they're doing in DC. They're not policing the streets or whatever people like to think. They're literally in parks picking up trash. Now these are people who have normal jobs as the National Guard. So people understand the National Guard isn't the Army. I mean, they kind of are. They have the same training, right? But people join the National Guard because they're like, oh, I get to go ahead and help my state out if there's a flood or an emergency or something like that. Well, in the end of the day, they all have regular jobs, right? And then you go 1 weekend a month to training. And then after that 1 weekend a month for training, each year you do 1 month someplace doing something, training or whatever, right? It's a part-time thing unless there's an emergency in your state. So Donald Trump calling up the National Guard or, requesting the National Guard and these red states sending the National Guard into DC, it's ridiculous. These people are leaving their real jobs to take just a small percentage of their normal pay. They can't pay their mortgage, they're leaving their families. I mean, think about it. The National Guard was away for Christmas, for Thanksgiving, and they were picking up trash in DC. And now a study just was released last week that showed that the deployment of the National Guard in DC had absolutely no impact on the crime rate.
Oh, I'm sure it didn't.
Anybody with a half a cent could have told you that it wouldn't have any impact.
I actually, unrelated to anything political, I was at a concert in D.C. and
Yeah.
2 people leaving the concert got in a fight. And what did the National Guard do? They called the police.
Yeah.
They did not, like,
Yeah.
because they can't.
Yeah, they're like
They-
security.
yeah,
You know,
it-
observe and report. Observe and report. you
horrible
know?
waste of
All they're
resources
missing is the segues.
and taking them away from their family.
Right.
So related to that,
Mm-hmm.
and people being deployed in our cities where they shouldn't, I wanted to ask you about ICE. I've seen you
Yeah.
at events and protesting ICE, but I wanted to ask you, like, in your position in like Maryland politics, how do you want to address ICE in Maryland?
ICE is law enforcement. ICE is very simple. Okay, the harder you make it for them to operate, the less they'd want to operate. You know, in Maryland, for the longest time, like the guy that I'm running against, for 5 years, he killed the bill that would have stopped 287G agreements. So to give you background for people that might know, a 287G agreement is a relationship, an official agreement that a state government or local government has with ICE. So it basically deputizes local police to be ICE officers, which means that they have the ability to have access to the ICE database and so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say, you know, you got somebody in Maryland with an accent, and they don't come to a complete stop at a stop sign. Local law enforcement pulls them over. If the local law enforcement has a 287G agreement, they can see the person's license, and clearly on the license it'll say not to be used as a real ID, which is code for this person is more than likely undocumented or not a U.S. citizen, right? So that person, that cop, can go back to their car and run the person's name. If they come up in a database as being undocumented, they can hold that person for up to 48 hours without a charge. To allow immigration to come and pick the person up and deport them. And what happens with these agreements is when you have women who might be abused, or if there's crime within the immigrant community or whatever, they're less apt to dial 911 and report something because they're afraid if they do it, they're going to be deported. So it just breaks trust with the community completely. And for 5 years, the guy I'm running against used his power as Senate president to kill that bill. In the state Senate. It was this year, in this election year, that he did bring it up for a vote, and it passed overwhelmingly as an emergency measure in both the House and the Senate here in Maryland. But you know, that doesn't help the hundreds of families who were split up. You have to remember, a lot of people think that this is people who committed crimes, right? But it's really something stupid, maybe speeding or not coming, to a police. It's stuff
the
that
misdemeanors
everybody
we
does.
commit accidentally
Not even
every day.
misdemeanors. It's civil offenses.
Yeah.
In fact, being undocumented is a civil offense. It's like a parking ticket. It's not a crime.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so 87% of these folks in Maryland, the hundreds of people that have been, deported because of 287G agreements, they didn't commit a crime. They have no criminal record. Most of them had families. So literally, by dragging his feet, my opponent, Bill Ferguson, was responsible for hundreds of Maryland families, immigrant families, being split apart. I mean, this year, we didn't just pass the 287G ban in Maryland, but we also passed the Community Trust Act, which we became the 14th state to do so, which means that there can't even be unofficial relationships between law enforcement and ICE. So you can't just pick up your buddy, from ICE and say, hey, I got this guy. 1 out of 3 children in Maryland have an immigrant parent. This doesn't stop ICE, but what it does do, it relieves a lot of trauma that these children in in Maryland will have, whether mom or dad will come home at the end of the day.
100%.
But still we have to go further on this, right? Right now, ICE, they need a few things, right? They need a place to set up, a headquarters. They need a deportation center, like a detention center. And they also need to be close to an airport for the deportation flights. The very first thing that I intend to introduce when I go into the State House next year is a ban on converting existing buildings into detention centers. If a building wasn't explicitly built as a detention center, it can't be converted into one. Doing this would require the federal government to dish out millions of dollars and take several years to build an actual detention center, and then find the land for it, and so on and so forth. And then it's easy. Then you can pass a state bill that says state land or whatever. You need a special permit process in order to build a federal you know,
You need an
right,
exemption.
exactly. And, you know, you can keep going down all these little things that you have to do, but it's important with this
Friction.
with this rise of authoritarianism and just the loss of so much democracy and freedom in this country, that every single state legislature does whatever they can to make it harder for ICE to operate.
Absolutely.
You know, even here in Baltimore, just down the street, you know, you have two federal buildings. You know, both of them house ICE. One ERO, one HSI, Homeland Security Investigations. They park their federal trucks out front of these buildings every single day illegally. Well, ticket them every single day, and when they don't pay the tickets, tow them.
100%.
You know, like it's that. I mean, that's what we have to do.
100%.
You know, we're fighting a battle here for literally the soul of America.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know.
By the way, for those of you who are seeing me for the first time, I did used to work in commercial construction, like big, massive commercial construction. It would take years to build a facility for real. It takes a long time.
Yeah.
And that is the friction we need to slow this down.
Right, 100%. 100%.
Awesome. You mentioned it a little bit when we started talking. One of the things I want to talk about is Maryland's actually very good at this currently, but obviously we could always be better. Like especially now with this term of Trump, there are more and more attacks on the queer and especially trans community. Like, do you have any plans or intentions, like, to protect that in Maryland, like in a sanctuary city-esque sort of way?
So Baltimore is almost a sanctuary city. Maryland, Baltimore is just queerly beautiful. It's a very. I met a woman the other day who came from Louisiana, I believe, and she started a coloring book company. It's really amazing. It's like adult coloring books. You know, your city or postcards of Baltimore does stuff for kids coloring books. I mean, it's really cool. It's, you know, a lot of adults are getting into coloring because it's like, you know, it relieves some of the stress.
You need a low stress hobby.
Yeah, she's such a beautiful person, and she told me that she never felt accepted or at home until she came to Baltimore. And it's important to embrace that, you know. It's important to make sure that our you know our trans friends and neighbors, you know, have access to healthcare that they need. Healthcare should be equal and even across the board, you know, especially when it comes to gender affirming care. That's missing a lot in Maryland, and it's also underfunded in Maryland. There's databases out there. Like I just heard the other day that the school system tries, it's in order to protect students, they categorize them as like a special student, like, you know, that might be trans, just to make sure that they're in some sort of protect. Don't put people in databases,
no, absolutely
even
not.
if the intention is good. All right, once you put people in databases, that opens up a whole can of Nazi-ish stuff, you know, that just we don't need as a state. There's a lot that we have to do because obviously Donald Trump, every fascist regime in history has to pick the boogeyman, right?
Absolutely.
And the boogeyman to Donald Trump and the MAGA movement are immigrants and trans people. It gets them votes. It's just an easy thing, an easy target. Although there's real no data that, I mean, you know, immigrant folks commit less crimes than Americans.
Per capita than we do, yeah, absolutely.
Right, you know, trans people are definitely not a boogeyman. They're our friends and our neighbors and our loved ones, and they're awesome. And it's sad to me because there's so many people, especially younger trans people that I spoke to, given out a lot of hugs. People are just afraid. You know, every time when you turn on TikTok or Instagram or the news, and then there's some other idiot talking about trans people as the boogeyman, you know, it spurs this hate that is unneeded. And maybe we need harsher laws on that. Maybe we should hold, you know, social media platforms accountable for things like that.
I don't disagree, and I appreciate that you didn't shy away from the words Nazi or fascist, because lots of people are like, they're adjacent. Oh no, they're here.
No, it's very clear. You know, when Hitler and Mussolini both rose to power, it wasn't through violence. Most people think it was. Not at first. It was towards the end, right?
Yeah.
But in the beginning, the very first thing they had to do was control their parties. All right, and that's definitely what Trump has done. We have seen a mass exodus from the Republican Party into people who become unaffiliated voters now, because this party that is left of the Republican Party is just not the Republican Party they used to know. I'm not siding with Republicans, but there used to be normal people you could have conversations with that didn't make
I don't disagree.
Exactly, it's like they might differ on me about how we spend our money, trickle down versus, from the bottom up. But they were like normal people. The MAGA thing is just wild, man. And what Donald Trump has done is he's now controlling the party, right? And once you control the party, and what happened in Indiana is proof in the pudding. Indiana did not back Donald Trump when it came to mid-cycle redistricting. A Republican legislature, Republican Senate, right? Mm-hmm. I think 8 of those senators were up for re-election, and 5 of them who voted against redistricting lost their seats to pro-MAGA candidates. So it sent a message to all Republicans that if you're not MAGA and towing the Donald Trump line, even if you disagree with it and believe that he's taking away freedoms and democracy, you're going to lose power. You're going to lose your seat.
Absolutely.
So there you go. Donald Trump's now controlled the party, right? And then we live in a state, Maryland, where we don't allow unaffiliated voters to vote in primaries, which is bad because we have one Republican member of Congress, Andy Harris, who is a huge Trump, get on my knees, whatever you want, sir, right, kind of guy. And in the end of the day, he would not win a primary if independents, if unaffiliated voters were allowed to vote in the primary. Because so many of the normie Republicans have left the party because of the MAGA movement. They outnumber the MAGA folks on the Eastern Shore of Maryland, where Andy Harris serves. At the end of the day, it would be hard for him to win a primary with that.
I'm actually a registered Republican in Maryland, specifically to vote in their primaries.
Okay, all right.
Like specifically
and we're getting along.
to hedge to the least fascist. It hasn't worked yet, but I'm hopeful.
So you're tactically a Republican.
Yes. I will never check that box in the voting booth, but I will check that box in the primary.
Nice. I see. Okay, it's interesting.
I'm going to vote as left as I can in the vote, but before we get to the vote, I might go, just in case my vote doesn't work in a couple months, can we shift a little this way?
Right.
Let's move the Overton window.
One last point
absolutely.
of fascism. Education's the other thing, too. You have to control the information, the message, and the education. The purchase of TikTok, the creation of Truth Social, getting the tech people, Meta and all them in the room to tweak their algorithms. This is controlling the narrative and the information.
Absolutely.
72%. Yeah, 72% of Americans get their news from social media. Where only 21% get their news from a reliable source. That's important, and MAGA understands that. They're going into small races, school boards, city councils, and things like that, and infiltrating small, easy-to-win races. They're controlling the narrative in social media, and now they want to go ahead and completely defund and eliminate the Department of Education. It is fascism.
100%.
It is exactly fascism. And he puts his fucking picture on everything.
Everything.
Every building, passports. I mean, anyone that doesn't believe that this is fascism either failed out of my government course when I was a high school teacher, or they're just blind.
They clearly haven't seen the giant Mussolini face in the town square.
Oh, yeah, right. I mean, exactly. It's just like, it's there, When your enemy tells you who they are, listen, and take heed. Anyway,
Absolutely. No, you're good. You're good. So kind of related to what we were just talking about there, because fascism controls the media, it controls information, it controls education.
Right.
They also really manipulate religion.
Right.
And Hegseth recently chopped the list of approved religions in the military down to 30-some from 200. I
didn't know that.
Yeah. He actually, interestingly, one of the ones he cut out that is causing some strife is he said Mormons don't count anymore. And it is interesting to me that the party of religion, like the party that says we are Christians, we are religion, whatever, you have freedom of their religion, but not freedom from their religion.
I don't know anything about this. I have to say, first time I'm hearing about it, but it won't be true in the end. Definitely, that is a violation of the Constitution.
100%. Until it's true now, someone will challenge it, and
then it will go to
he's
court.
just looking to see if he can get away with it.
I don't understand that. I don't understand the Mormon thing. The Mormons aren't very MAGA. I mean, heck, it was a Mormon that created Medicare for All. What was the guy's name?
I don't recall.
He was a U.S. senator. He was the governor of Massachusetts.
I'll put the text right here.
Yeah,
when
whoever
I
this was. Yeah, is actually a very interesting guy because he was the only Republican senator that also voted to impeach Donald Trump. Mitt Romney. Oh wow, that came out of
Oh.
yeah. Take a Google Mitt Romney and I would never see eye to eye politically, but morally as a person doing the right thing, like he truly felt like he was doing the right thing. But yeah, he created. I think he was the governor of Massachusetts and created a Medicare for all type system
In that state.
Yeah, which led to us creating the led to the creation of the ACA, which was a mimic of that. They used to call it Romney Care before it was called Obamacare, because basically it was a carbon copy
Right.
of that.
Mhm.
It came from a Republican because he was the right thing to do. That's the one thing I like. See, that's those Republicans we were talking about earlier, right? That's just like, look, we might not agree economically on how to do the, how to build our economy, but in the end of the day, it's like a person that morally believes what is right and goes after that, and it doesn't hurt people, it helps. I can get with that. I could have a beer with Mitt Romney, although he doesn't drink because he's a
No,
Mormon.
I can- Side note, since most people that see my content are like 35 or under, if you look up Reagan, who's responsible for like half the problems we have, talking about immigrants, the kindness in his voice about
Yeah.
keeping families together, it's insane that we've done that in 40 some years.
Yeah, I mean, George Bush allowed for so much amnesty for immigrants. The younger George Bush, he allowed for specialty visas so people could come here and work on farms and then go back on the off season. I don't know how the Republican Party have moved so far away from where they used to be.
The cult of personality took over quick.
Yeah, it's the fascism. Yeah.
So I have one more. This is kind of like a jokey question, but it's
Wow,
for real.
he puts his
I put my
tablet
tablet
down.
down,
Yeah.
but
This could be serious.
so-
serious question. All right.
So one of the things that prompted me to ask to talk to you is I have seen people that are staunch capital D Democrats and solid Republicans call you Maryland's Mom Donnie, which to me is a good endorsement.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that?
Mom
comparison?
Dottie got a lot of the Trump vote too.
He did.
There's a woman in Federal Hill who has a big Trump flag on it. She's got my little flyer. I guess she must be a Democrat. But I feel that this is the movement this is where the Democratic Party is moving towards. And here's what I mean, right? When Donald Trump first ran, he bullshitted everybody about drain the swamp, and he was the swamp, right?
Yeah.
But basically, he was stealing Bernie rhetoric, all the progressive rhetoric. We want corporate money out of politics. We want to give more power to the people through, an election with ranked choice voting, so on and so forth. We want to take a bottom-up approach to things rather than top-down. Like the guy I'm running against, gives hundreds of millions of dollars in corporate welfare out to developers because he believes if you build a fancy building, people come. And we, the progressives, or what we call abundance Democrats, we believe that's not how it is. You have to invest in people and then people come with public transit or so on and so forth. We live in a city in Baltimore. I don't know.
I do.
Yeah. So we live in Baltimore, and Baltimore is like 1950s when it comes to our public transit system. This week I've been on 3 buses and 2 of them didn't have working air conditioning. Meanwhile, the guy that I'm running against for 3 years in a row killed a bill called the Transportation and Climate Alignment Act, which would have taken hundreds of millions of dollars away from highway expansion, hundreds of millions of dollars, and put it into public transit, to invest in public transit. Killed it. In a time when those that rely on public transit in Baltimore only have access to 8.5% of the jobs within an hour commute because the public transit system is so bad. And we wonder why people can't get off of public benefits.
Look, it is a financial privilege for me to take ride shares everywhere, but I could not take public transit if I wanted to. It is so inaccessible to so much of the city.
Yeah.
And if it is accessible, it takes so long to get there.
And everybody's late, and you got to explain to your boss why you're late because the bus was late. It's just ridiculous. You cannot have a well-run society and city without a good, robust public transit system. That's just 101. But yeah, I have a lot of similarities with Bernie, a lot of similarities with Mamdani's vision. There's the Democratic Party, so people know, because this is very interesting stuff. We have split up into 3 different
Your
factions.
teacher's coming out.
My teacher's coming out. So, before the Democratic Party was this Big Tent and everybody is welcome, right? But fundamentally, there are 3 real different different parts of the Democratic Party, or three different rooms, you would say. First is the old school Democrats, right? The Chuck Schumers, the Nancy Pelosi's. I'll take corporate money. It's okay. We're going to go ahead and stick with the status quo, give corporate handouts because it'll trickle down. I mean, so, right, both Reaganomics is still very much alive with the old school Democrats,
100%,
right?
yeah.
Then you have the Bernies, all right? The Bernies are true progressives, the 1%, eat the rich, so on and so forth. Now you have this third faction that has risen up. That's like an Elizabeth Warren, which is the abundance Democrats. We don't have enough of stuff. We don't have enough public transit. We don't have enough housing. We don't have enough health care. And obviously, one of the ways you do this is by a more fair taxation system against the rich to benefit the working person, as well as more equality when it comes to child care. We just need more stuff, more teachers, more everything, right? The abundance. Now, the way the abundance Democrats get there is the same way that we don't, you don't take corporate money, because when you take corporate campaign donations, it does influence your vote. There's no way around it. And if the guy I'm running against takes $25,000 every single year from our local utility company, BGE, owned by Exelon, and then turns around and tells the news, that doesn't influence my vote. Come on, folks.
By the way, as someone who lives under BGE,
yeah, I mean, it's, you have a monopoly utility company. Look, no business in the world ever invests $25,000 into something if there's not a return on that investment.
yeah.
So they're not giving him $25,000 to do the will of the people. BGE is giving them $25,000 to do the will of BGE and Exelon. So this third faction, which is new, this is Mamdani. Zoran is an abundance Democrat, which blends, we need more of everything, and the way that we do it is by a fair taxation system, and we're not going to take corporate money to do it. That is where the Democratic Party is moving towards. The Bernies on the far, far left, whatever the heck you're going to call the Chuck Schumers and the Nancy Pelosi's, the guy I'm running against, these corporate conservative Democrats that are actually borderline Republicans now, abundance is the movement forward. And that also, when we live in food deserts, Zoran's plan for a public, grocery store, a city-owned grocery store, it's a wonderful plan. Now, municipal grocery stores, so let me start this all over.
Okay,
so
go for it.
if you look at Zoran's municipal thing, right, municipal grocery stores, this is a good example of abundance, okay? Obviously, we need more food because there's food deserts and people can't have access to it. Nor can people have access to affordable food. So we're just gonna have the city run a grocery store. Now, municipal grocery stores have been done before. They didn't work because they were in a too small of a scale. But New York has 12 million people, I believe the population of New York is, let's say, give or take. So if you had a few of these grocery stores, it might work. And here's why. The greatest example of a state-run grocery store is the military. They have commissaries. The commissaries are all over the world. Now, all that they do take some bit of tax dollar money to go ahead and operate. The great majority of it, the large portion of its operating mechanism comes from people buying the groceries,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
And when you can buy groceries on such a large scale, you can buy them at wholesale rates. You can have a transportation system, and then you can deliver the food. I mean, a lot of military people will joke, veterans will joke that, in order to get away from the horrors of capitalism, I joined the army to get to socialism. And there's so much of that, And I'm really eager to see Zoran's plan work. 54% of Marylanders in our state live in a food desert. That's not just cities, too, right? A lot of people just think of cities. But you think of the rural areas, too, like the older folks that live in, out in the mountains and stuff that don't have access to reliable food. So they're going to the Dollar Generals and things like that and getting horrible food. And we're wondering why they live like 6 years less than everybody else, because they get so many diseases and sicknesses that can be preventable with a better diet. When we have a larger scale grocery system, that is how things will work. That is how we can keep the costs down, and it would be a great idea. So I'm really eager to see that. But that is an example, that state-run grocery store, that there is a need. We need more of it. That's the abundance idea. And that's the type of Democrat I am. It's a new thing. The term is new. It just was coined last year. But yeah.
I also feel like it's a little less scary than Democratic Socialists to a lot of people.
Well, the Democratic Socialists align closer to the abundance theory. And you're right, like Democratic, so if you were going for like a raw, like let's talk about, what are these definitions of these things? I mean, a lot of people don't like titles, but in the end of the day, that's the closest fitting thing as Democratic Socialist. By far, Bernie Sanders is a Democratic Socialist. But when you have people like Mamdani, who's cutting red tape and trying to make it easier for small businesses to get permits and sort of, that's kind of my idea, that is now starting to become pragmatic. And the further you go to the pragmatic, the further away you get from Democratic Socialists and more into this abundance theory. And that really is the future of the Democratic Party. That's why this race is really important. If I win, and it looks like I might, if I win against this guy who is the second most powerful, if not the most powerful politician in Maryland, a Democrat who takes money from anybody, he has $2 million in his campaign account. He's spent $900,000 against me so far. Meanwhile, I don't take a dime from corporations or developers. If I beat him, and what would be, and it's worse, real quick, and he has sports betting mailing for him, hundreds of thousands of dollars the sports betting industry has dumped in his campaign. That article just came out in our local newspaper, the Baltimore Banner today, that why are all these outside interests? You have dark Republican, dark MAGA money doing push polls against me, trying to make me like a bad guy for, to benefit him. If we win this, it just sends a message again to these corporate-backed Democrats that everyone is tired of, the same Democrats that allowed Trump to rise and gain power, that their time is over. Their moment in this country is over. People are hurting. We can no longer afford to live if we continue to allow either MAGA or the old school Democrats to be in charge.
Absolutely. One of the things I think they're not ready to hear is if somebody wanted diet Republican, they'd just get Republican. They don't want, we don't want that anymore. People in general don't want that anymore.
Right. And I think that's why you saw so many Trump people supporting Mamdani, because a lot of the people originally supported Trump because he didn't seem like a politician, and they bought into that whole I'm going to drain the swamp and I'm going to give all your money back. Obviously, it was full bullshit. But that's the message that people heard because people were hurting.
Yeah.
And when people are hurting, they want something different. And it sure as hell wasn't Como that was going to help them. It was Zoran, and hopefully here in Baltimore, it's me.
Awesome. Thank you so much, man. I really
man.
appreciate you taking time to meet with me as the sun goes down.
Thanks.
Hopefully, after you're in, we can do this again and we can talk about how things have worked out for you.
I appreciate that. And look, I'm running against a Goliath here. If anybody wants to chip in a few dollars, makegoodchange.com, because we've done this entire campaign off of small dollar donations from individuals.
Yeah,
so if people want to be part of this new progressive movement, this abundance of making things good and taking care of working people, please chip in $5 at makegoodchange.com, and I love you.
Awesome. Thanks so much. I'll see you guys soon.
See you.